Hello, and welcome to this session today, live with Building Resilience, Surviving and Thriving in Tough Times. I am honored to do this session for you today with some of my favorite people, Gail Dorr, who leads our leadership, coaching, and PQI practice. Welcome, Gail. She's truly an authority on these topics. We're glad to have you.
Thank you.
And Carmen Stories, who joined us recently, and he and I have a long history, which you're going to hear an incredible story today that I'm just thrilled to see him out in the world helping others with his story. And Danielle, thank you, Carmen. Go ahead.
No, thank you, Teresa. I'm looking forward to a good discussion. Thanks.
I'm thrilled you're here, Carmen. And by the way, this was Carmen's idea to do this, and it's a really important topic. And Danielle, who's also going to share a very personal story about resilience. We're so glad to have you. Can you introduce yourself?
Thank you. So Danielle Jennings, I'm head of North American Channel Execution at Cloud Software Group, so formerly Citrix. Most of you know us as Citrix, but I'm happy to be here.
And you and Gail know each other as well.
We do, yes. I went through some of Gail's sessions, a year ago, maybe. Yes, she took our team through that, which was extremely helpful because it was through a really challenging time for our company and our team. So that was great.
Yeah, I remember that. Amazing. Well, with that, this is a really important topic, and we want to be part of the solution. I always say be part of the solution, not the problem. And so, Achieve Unite is here to help. We're going to talk to you at the end about some scholarships available. And hopefully you'll have both an education and some wisdom throughout our session today. So let me, at this point, turn it over, Gail, to you to give us some science on resilience and why is it so important in the business world right now?
Great, thank you. So before I begin and we get any further, we really want to let you know that the session is going to cover really important but sensitive topics that are related to substance use and mental wellness in the workplace, and they might be triggering to some of you. So we want you to, above all, take care of yourself and prioritize your well-being. So with that, I wanted to start with an opening quote about resilience, and this comes from Nelson Mandela, and he says, "Do not judge me by my success. Judge me by how many times I have fallen and have gotten back up again." And I think that really exemplifies what resilience truly is. Resilience wasn't really talked about much before the 1960s. It started out sort of with the work. Those of you who've taken psychology courses, you might remember Erik Erikson and his human development theories. And he started talking about it, but he didn't call it resilience. And then around 1991, Dr. Norman Gometsky took his work to the next level. And he was the first one to actually talk about resilience and its relationship to stress. And then in 2002, Harvard Business Review was the first one to pick up the concept of resilience as being resilient in the workplace. And so from there, we've really continued this work. And today, resilience is definitely considered a form of mental wellness. It's a key competency for all of us in the workplace. And in fact, low resilience is considered a risk factor for mental illness. And when we look at leaders and organizations, we know that the World Health Organization estimates that this can cost businesses up to $1 trillion a year in lost productivity and lost customer sales and lost dynamic teams, losing dynamic teams. So this is an important topic for business. And I just wanted to share the definition of resilience, just so we're all speaking the same language. And this comes from the American Psychological Association. What they say is resilience is the process of an outcome of successfully adapting to difficult, challenging life experiences, especially through mental, emotional, and behavioral flexibility and adjustment to internal and external demands. And that basically really talks about coming up against adversity and then bouncing back. But beyond that, what I find really interesting is they added to that definition, and they say as much as resilience involves bouncing back from these difficult experiences, it can also involve profound personal growth. So research shows that people come out of adversity stronger and that they can find meaning in their experiences. And so that's what we're going to really hear about in Carmen's story today and in Danielle's story today.
Yep.
So Carmen, I'd love to hand it over to you so we can hear about your story of resilience.
Yeah, thanks very much, Gail. So what I'd like to do is talk about my personal experiences, what I've learned, how I built my own resilient superpower, and how I've transferred that into the business world, and how I use the things I've learned to be more effective business leader. So first of all, it's a superpower. Resilience is a superpower that we all need in our personal lives and in our business lives. And I'll start with why. We're all experiencing this perpetual change, especially those of us who work in the tech world, which a lot of the folks on this call are part of. And that the pace of change is really accelerating. And we're constantly challenged with our human ability to adapt, survive, and thrive. And when you look at the tech world in 2021, 2022, there was this great resignation where people were voluntarily leaving their companies. Now, all of a sudden, we're in 2023, and we've had not tens of thousands, but hundreds of thousands of jobs that have been eliminated. And talk about a reason for people to have to be more resilient, right? That's the cause that we're facing with today. It'll be something else 6 months from now, but that's what it is today. And as leaders, it's no longer good enough for us to be resilient. We need all of our team members to be resilient. And Gail said something very interesting. Resilience is something you can build, right? You can develop. Many people think, oh, that person's resilient or that person's not. Well, it takes, a lot of work to develop those skills so that you can become resilient. And I could tell you what helped me become resilient. Over the past 3 decades, I've survived and thrived through several technology transitions, personal experiences, and as I say, tragedies. Right? My personal experiences required me to build up my personal resilience, which was portable over to my business resilience. And my resilience education started at an early age, right? I was a young boy growing up in an inner city, Newark, New Jersey. And I was involved in many situations, we'll call them, where I had to make sure they weren't escalated, right? I had to be strong, but flexible to navigate my way through or around these situations. And I'll say a handful of times throughout my youth, those situations were literally life or death, right? Mm-hmm. So I got through that, and I graduated with an engineering degree. I got married. I was an engineer. I was a sales leader, started a family. I bought a house in the suburbs. I'm thinking, look at me. I'm resilient, right? I went through all this. I made it out of the inner city, graduated. I have a career. I was resilient. But in 2003, I faced a phenomenal challenge dealing with my older son, Nicholas's substance abuse. And it started one day in 2003 when 2 of his friends came in my house and said, Mr. and Mrs. Cerise, can we talk to you? We think Nick has an issue. We think we're worried about his well-being, and we think something should be done about it, right? And that was the beginning of me learning. Later that night, we met with Nick and we did an intervention. I didn't even know what an intervention was. We did an intervention and we got him in his first rehab later that night. And I think about the learning that I had to go through to first accept it, then deal with it, take action that would help protect him and his health. And that was a night that I'll never forget. My wife will never forget. And we spent a lot of time on this emotional roller coaster, right? Where we had the dreaded phone calls, we had sleepless nights, trips to hospitals, sad holidays. And Gail, you talked about triggers. We had triggers, right? One of the triggers that we had when my son was in his substance abuse phase and he was not in recovery, we'd be sitting at home, we'd hear that public service announcement on TV. It's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are? And we would look at each other, my wife and I, and say, oh my God, we only know where 2 of our 3 children are, right? Inevitably, we'd go in the bedroom, look at them, see that they're in bed, and then get up and talk for the next 2 or 3 hours about where he could be. Where could our son Nicholas be? Many times we had literally no idea. Well, I could tell you after 8 years, 8.5 years, I lost count at 30 rehabs, outpatient and inpatient rehabs. Over 1,000 sleepless nights, well over 1,000. we ultimately got the dreaded phone call. I was on the West Coast. I was in Seattle at a partner meeting. It was 6:30 a.m. West Coast time, and my wife called me and said that my son Nick had passed. And at that point, I was across the country. And you talk about resilience, right? The first thing I had to do is calm my wife down, try to be there for her remotely. And then I had to think about, how do I get home? How do I get on a 5.5 hour plane ride to go meet my family and have them relive everything all over again when I got home 8 hours after they found out the bad news? So I'll never complain about another plane trip, because that was the worst, right? I don't ever want to have another plane trip like that. We were distraught. We were angry. All of the emotions that you would think we would be feeling, we were feeling. And I didn't know how to continue. Like, why did I care about going to work and moving on when I feel like as a parent, I didn't succeed. I failed. I lost, my son passed, right? But I had to, right? I had to find that reason why. And I did it for my wife, my other 2 children who were going through their own grieving process. And I wanted to be there for them. I had to keep working and make money to pay the mortgage and live and try to rebuild a healthy family. And the lessons I learned going through that, I didn't know it at the time, right? It took me years later to realize, when people said, "How did you make it?" Teresa, you asked me 6 years ago, how did you do it? How did you go to work? And so it got me thinking about, what were the things I learned? And I boil it down. Nothing's as easy as, here are the 3 things, but I'll talk about 3 things that I learned. I learned about mentality, having the positive mentality, how to be adaptable to the situations, to learn what you needed to learn. And the third is trust. You need a trusting network to get through it. On the mentality side, there were times when I grieved and I cried, and there still are times that I do that. But I tend to get in my car, take a ride to the cemetery alone, have my cry, grieve, and then try to, when I walk in the door, be the father that I need to be, and up tempo and getting things done around the house. So it's okay to grieve, but you have to have the positive mentality where you're not the victim. You have to become the victor, right? That's the key. And everyone needs to realize attitude's a choice. You wake up every morning. If you're in a bad mood, you're choosing that, right? You could choose to be in a good, positive mood. It's not easy. And there are days where I wake up where I'm not in a positive mood. And that's when I'm by myself. I process things and I try to do that self-therapy to get where I need to be. There's plenty of books and things you could do to learn more about it. I like American football. Ray Lewis, a linebacker with the Baltimore Ravens. He has a whole YouTube video on Be the Lion. And he talks about the fact the lion's not the fastest animal. He's not the strongest animal. He's not, or she, they're not the toughest animal, but they're the king of the jungle, right? The elephant walks by. They don't care that they're 5 times, the elephant's 5 times as big. They've decided they're going to be the king of the jungle. And all you have to do is watch Animal Planet, and nothing ever, tells you that that's not the case. And in business, I'll tie this back to business. Everything we do in business has your attitude shining through. If you're talking to your boss, if you're talking to your team, if you're going on an interview and you don't have that positive mentality, don't think that that's not emanating out and people aren't seeing that. It is. So I always say, you're going on an interview, the first thing you should do is look in the mirror, smile, make sure you have a positive attitude, make sure that carries into the interview with you. Second is adaptability. And I already said in my personal life, the adaptability I needed to be resilient was I had to learn about addiction. I had to learn about, what is AA? What is NA? What are rehabs? What's inpatient? What's outpatient? What are the 12 steps? How do you work insurance, right? I had to be adaptable. I had to learn all that stuff in order to do the best that I could do for my family. And I really had to learn to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And that's the key. Many of us, when we're uncomfortable, will say, oh my God, I got to go read a book or something that I'm comfortable doing. No, be comfortable being uncomfortable. And I learned that lesson from, I went to a graduation for the New Jersey State Troopers, which is one of the most elite, paramilitary law enforcement divisions in the country, Massachusetts, New Jersey. They have some of the top state trooper organizations. I went to a graduation. There are 120 graduates. So I started asking the question, how many people apply? It was 5 or 10,000, right? How many people take the test? Hundreds. How many people pass the test? 300 or 400. How many people walk in the door for the boot camp? About 200. And 115, 120 people graduated. I mean, and then one of those troopers was recognized by his peers as the outstanding recruit, like the number one trooper. And I listened to his speech, and that's where this be comfortable being uncomfortable hit me, because when he got there, he said there was a voice in his head that said, "Why are you here? Why are you here? What are you doing?" And he said he had to change that and become adaptable to his environment. And he changed the voice to, "I can do this. I can do this. I will do this." And what's cool about that, after the graduation, I took a picture with that top recruit because he's my nephew, right? He's my godson. It just so happened that he was the outstanding recruit. None of us knew it because it was kept a secret until the night of the graduation. So again, moving this to the business world, you have to be adaptable. You have to learn new skills. Look at where your industry is going and what are you missing? What can you learn about? If you were 10, 15 years ago, if you were doing nothing but on-prem with dedicated hardware and this thing called cloud came about, you had to learn about cloud, because look how prominent it is now. And so now maybe it's AI, and how is AI going to impact things? So be adaptable in your personal and business lives, and that's how you're going to become more resilient. The third and final point is trust. I can't tell you how important trust was when my wife and I had to get through the addiction, and my children, my son's addiction. We had to make sure we trusted several people, right? Not everybody, when you're going through a problem, I think you'll all relate to this. Not everybody sticks around and says, "Hey, I'm going to be at your house. I want to help." Very few people give you unconditional trust, right? So there were two people that I could call at midnight on any given day and said, "Can you meet me at the fill in the blank, the hospital, the police department, a highway hotel, a street corner?" And there were two people. One was my sister. One was my wife's brother. And if we couldn't rely on them with unconditional trust, I don't know if we would have made it through. And so when you think of the business world, the same thing is true, right? If you get laid off and you haven't been keeping your network warm, well, I'm sorry, but that's not the time to say, "Hi, how you doing? I just lost my job." You got to be doing that throughout, and you have to do it continuously, and not just do it superficially. Do it because you care about people, and you need to get mentored by folks, and you can do some mentoring, and that's how you build relationship. And when I joined Achieve Unite, I learned even more about trust and how you can build trust. And what I think about is if you want to look at the Navy SEALs, what kind of resilient speech can you have without referring to the Navy SEALs? But if you look on YouTube, Simon Sinek does this. It's only 2.5 minutes. He said, how did they pick Navy SEAL Team 6, right? They look at performance and they look at trust. And they need people who can perform, run fast, lift heavy weights, swim fast, hold their breath long. But they also look at trust, and if there's a high performer with low trust, that person doesn't get picked for these special excursions with the Navy SEALs. They'd rather someone who may have slightly lower performance, but very high trust, because they know in the battlefield, on the mission, that team can trust that person, and he or she can trust his colleagues or her colleagues. So that really hit me, because I didn't realize, I thought it was all about performance, and I didn't know the role that trust played in the Navy SEALs. So that's what I would tell you about trust. So it's have the right mentality, make sure you're adaptable and you're learning the skills you need to know, and make sure you're building a trusting network in your personal lives. Evaluate who's in that trusted network and who's not, and just make sure you fortify those relationships. And I'm hoping that these lessons resonated with you, and I look forward to helping others build their resilient superpower in any way I can. And I got to tell you personally, it feels liberating to finally be talking about this. This is the first time I'm talking openly in a public forum live about this. So it was a big step for me, and I hope you all can learn from it and help yourselves become more resilient. Thank you.
Carmen. That was absolutely awesome. And there is a huge correlation to everything you talked about in your personal life. And there's a lot going on right now about your business life and your personal life are no longer separated. It's all about leading an integrated life. And I think what you just did is demonstrated that and how you did it. So you've got me choked up. So thank you. And
Thank you,
Gail,
Teresa.
thank you, Carmen. It was amazing. Gail, is there anything you want to add before Danielle begins her talk?
I'm really impressed with this sense of toughness, but not toughness coming from fear, but toughness coming from that adaptability and that being willing to be vulnerable and trust others with these really important, private, scary parts of your life, and I think really that the toughness is a part of resilience, but it's this authenticity that doesn't come from fear, that comes from a sense of resolve, and it comes from a place of not reacting but responding in a thoughtful way, and that is a big part of resilience, and that was so well demonstrated. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail.
Thanks, Gail. Good. Well, Carmen, I just want to say Carmen is an amazing human being. No parent should ever go through a tragedy like this is in the comment. And several people just saying thank you for sharing your story and what a great friend and mentor you are. So, yeah, fantastic.
Very nice. Thank you.
Well, Danielle, you have a different kind of resilience and a different kind of talent. So,
I do. So, so first, let me start by saying, Carmen, so admirable and courageous of you to share that, because I can only imagine how difficult that must have been. So, but I know it really resonates with so many people that have gone through similar things, and it helps them to know that, other people are out there who've made it through similar struggles. So, so thank you for that. Really.
You're welcome.
My story, to Teresa's point, more around professional resilience, but I am a big believer that your professional life and personal life are so intertwined that it really all becomes one. And you'll notice a lot of the same themes that Carmen mentioned in his story, also in my story. I don't know that I lay them out quite as eloquently as Carmen did, but they are strewn throughout the story, I would say. So my career has taken a bit of a winding journey to get me where I am today. My background and education are in psychology and marriage and family counseling. So people sometimes wonder, how did I end up in IT? And to be honest, I sometimes wonder, how did I end up in IT? But if I really had to put some thought around it, it actually can all be traced back to those moments of resilience in my life when, I was faced with adversity and, had to, adapt and make decisions to move forward. So when I first entered the workforce, I had just finished my graduate degrees and was hired as an outpatient counselor for underprivileged youth. The very small salary that I was making was about 40% less than what teachers make here in South Florida. So needless to say, money was very tight. There was no saving for a rainy day, right? Every extra dollar was spent on groceries or gas. And then about 6 months into the job, the agency that I was working for was actually shut down for billing fraud. I was not involved. I had nothing to do with the billing, but I was suddenly out of a job. And so unsure how I was going to pay rent or buy food. I was completely panicked and feeling, very hopeless. And that was the first time I remember having to really put things into perspective. And I remember thinking back to the time when I was a kid, when my mom, who was a divorced single mother of three, she lost her job, had to figure out how to make ends meet, continue running a household, find a way to put food on the table, all while searching for a job, which, as many of us know, can be a full-time job in itself. But thinking about what my mom must have been going through and feeling at that time really helped shape my mindset, because yes, I was out of work, not a penny to my name, bank account, zero. But I only had to worry about myself. So I could find a way to get through because others in much worse situations had figured it out and found the strength to overcome. So if that meant cutting corners and eating cereal, and not the good cereal, the cheap cereal, whatever was BOGO for the week, that was okay, because I was healthy. I had people who loved me. I was going to power through somehow. And I did ultimately. So spent the next 5 years or so working as an elementary school guidance counselor. And it was during that time that I really found my why. And Carmen touched on Simon Sinek, right? Always been a big fan, right? And he has that piece on always start with your why. So during that time as a guidance counselor, I had my first child and quickly realized two things. One, how expensive children are, and two, that we don't pay our educators nearly enough. So, but having never been a big fan of change, leaving a profession that I absolutely loved was a really difficult choice, but I was willing to make that sacrifice because my family needed me to make more money, and they were my why. So I left the school board to pursue a career in sales in the mortgage industry. So this was May of 2005. So for those of you who are familiar with the mortgage industry, the industry was coming up on its decline about that time. Probably not the best career choice or time to get into that profession, but that's where I ended up. I spent just over 2 years in the industry in total. And so during that time, I became pregnant with my second child, lost my job due to the first mortgage bank that I worked for closing its doors. Got a job with another mortgage bank, and about 8 months into that job with the second mortgage bank, I woke up one morning it was August of 2007 to an email saying that they were also closing their doors and I no longer had a job. So now I was out of work with 2 kids, both under the age of 3. So daycare, diapers, you name it, and no health insurance for my family because the type of bankruptcy that the company had filed didn't allow for COBRA. So I went back to my why, put things into perspective. I had a family who was depending on me. I needed a job. I needed health insurance, and I needed that all really quickly because, for anyone who has little kids or has had little kids, the second you have any sort of lapse in your insurance, they're sick like every other day, right? So, so there was no time to feel sorry for myself, right? Had to, pull myself together and figure out, okay, like make a decision. What are you going to do? And at the time, my mom actually worked for Citrix. And she told me that I should, check out. They had some new positions that had recently posted, and I should go on and apply. And once again, being someone who doesn't like change and who has never really considered myself technical in any way, my initial thought was there is no way they're going to hire me at Citrix, right? But I had to shift my mindset. I was smart, I was motivated, I was willing to work hard. So I got dressed in my suit. For those of you who remember when suits were actually a thing in the business world, dating myself a bit, and went and met with the hiring manager, and he agreed to put me through the interview process, which was pretty intense. And I remember at the end of about 6 interviews, I said to him, I'm not technical. I don't know much of anything about technology or what Citrix really does, but I can learn and I can sell. So if you're willing to give me a chance, I won't let you down. Now, definitely for any of you going through interviews, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that talk track to a hiring manager, but I was young, inexperienced, a bit desperate, if we're being honest. So that's what came out at the time, and it actually worked. He ended up offering me the job. And from the day that the mortgage bank had closed its doors to the day I started at Citrix was exactly 6 weeks, which at the time seemed like a lifetime. Because like I said, my kids were sick every other day, was, panicked over, how quickly am I going to find something? But looking back, now I realize how fast that actually was to go from losing a job to not only finding a new one, but actually starting one in a completely different industry in 6 weeks is crazy, right? So, but if I didn't shift my mindset and take a more optimistic approach, one where I believe that I had what it took for an organization to take a risk on me, then I don't think I ever would have ended up at Citrix, which was the start of my almost 16-year journey with this company. Hard to believe, coming up on 16 years. But when I first started here, I was given 2 pieces of advice, and those have stuck with me throughout the years, which is ironic because I completely dismissed them at the time that they were given to me. And for those of you maybe who have worked with me over the years, you probably heard me pass this advice along to others. But the first piece of advice was to do as many different jobs that you're given the opportunity to do. And the second was to switch jobs every 2 years to keep myself relevant. Now, like I said, not a fan of change. So when I was given these little tidbits of advice, my initial thought was, nod and smile and thank them for, the great advice. And I'll definitely take that into consideration. But in the back of my mind, I was thinking, there is no way I'm changing jobs every 2 years and having to learn how to be good at my job all over again. Oddly enough, if I actually look back at my 16 years here, as of the beginning of this month, I just started my 10th role within the company. So actually averaging less than 2 years per role. And while at first the idea of learning something new and having to prove myself all over again each time was so scary, I've learned to embrace it. And it's actually made me so much more adaptable. It's taught me, as Carmen said, to be comfortable with being uncomfortable and to embrace the challenge in front of me. And by learning to do that, not only has it helped me grow personally and professionally, but it's made me that much more resilient because it has given me the opportunity to really expand my experience and skill set to give me the confidence that I never thought I would actually have. Most recently, my organization was purchased and merged with another company. And that process was a year in the making, probably a bit more, from when they announced it was going to happen to when actually, everything finally went through. So it was a very long, emotional, exhausting year. Because while we were all still tasked with our everyday jobs, which were, demanding to begin with, we now had the added stress of not knowing whether we'd have a job at the end of the whole process. But if there's one thing that I can look back and say that I learned about myself through that process was that I had become so much more resilient than the girl I was in my 20s when I thought my life was literally falling apart the first time I lost my job. I learned that I have the strength and the skill set, the knowledge and experience and the determination, and most importantly, the support to pick myself up and move forward no matter what happened. I'd be completely remiss if I didn't touch on that last point a little bit, and Carmen stressed it as well. Find your support system, because that is the one thing that has helped me get through not only the past year, but all of the difficult times in my life. Finding those people, whether it's in your professional life or your personal life, who are there to support you. The ones who help you believe in yourself even when you don't, the ones who give you a shoulder to cry on, the ones you can laugh with at how crazy everything is that's going on around you, and you need that, and the ones who give you purpose. So find those people in your life who will help you build your resilience. And if all else fails, never underestimate the power of a good theme song. That can help boost your mood even on the worst day. And as I wrap up, I'll leave you with this. Every setback that you encounter, every struggle that you're going to endure can help shape you and make you stronger if you open your mind to it, right? And learn from it. And it will come as no surprise to those of you on the line here that know me, that I'm going to wrap it all up with a famous quote from Michael Jordan, who said, "I have failed over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed."
Mm-hmm. So true. Wow, Danielle, thank you very much. That was also amazing and took it from a different lens, which I loved. The thing that is so common among both of you is these important foundational relationships and how they made such a difference in both of your lives. And I was just reading some recent research about people who have higher levels of trusted, deep relationships are more likely to be more satisfied, happier in life, less trauma, so there's something, and I think there's a lot, Gail can talk to us more about the science of this, but there's a lot going on in that domain right now. And then the other thing I take away from both of you is just your authenticity and your ability to share so candidly and transparently. It was just so inspiring. So thank you. So we would love to take some questions. If anyone has any questions in the chat, anybody want to comment? Any of you, floor is open. Gail, Carmen, Danielle.
Yeah, I would say that a lot of the recent research on resilience is talking about relational resilience. It's, exactly as both Carmen and Danielle have said, who do you go to when you need a cheerleader? Who do you go to help you see the way forward when you're stuck? Who do you go to? And we are going to actually make a handout available to you, which gives you an exercise to actually identify who do I go to for empathy? right? So when you get all these lists of people, you've built this resilience network. So when you maybe can't pull yourself back out or you're stuck, you know who to go to for what. And we encourage you to fill out this worksheet that really helps you look at those relational roles and how specifically each of them help you. And if you can put a name next to each of those ways, then you know who to go to for what. And I would encourage you to thank them. Let them know that, you know what, you play this cheerleader role for me. You play this role of giving me purpose, as Danielle said, and reminding me of the meaning of what I do, why I do the things I do, and thank them.
That's a great one. I think that'll be a great exercise for a lot of us to do and to take the time to think about it proactively. Carmen, comments?
No, this has been great. Danielle, it was great hearing your story. And it's amazing how similar to mine, like you went through these events and you're thinking, okay, I'm beyond it now. I'm in the mortgage industry. And then all of a sudden you lose your job, right? Mm-hmm. So you just got to be ready for the one after another. And it's literally true. Change is the only constant. We're all going to see change. And if you build a resiliency, then you're ready for these other changes. You can't take them as independent events, right? You got to use them to build your resilience. Thank you, Danielle, for sharing that. It was very, very inspiring.
Yeah, you're welcome. And that's a great point, Carmen, that you just made, right? Like it's you get through it, which is great, but then there's always more to come, right? There's always going to be that next challenge. And so that's the important piece around building your resilience. So you're ready for that next obstacle and that next challenge, because it's going to be there. You're going to face it, right? But the stronger you are, the more resilient you are, the easier it is for you to get through it, right? So I think that's the important piece.
Danielle, Elizabeth just put into the chat a beautiful, how you are the best boss she's ever had and how you helped her through career change and health issues. And then it was you are responsible for that. And, hopefully that makes you feel proud, because there's something about giving to others and helping them, right? That's just so rewarding. You've clearly made a big impact. Wow. Another person saying that too, both of you. So phenomenal, Danielle, phenomenal, Carmen.
Thank you.
Well, let's see if we have any other questions. Renata, thank you for sharing, inspiring, motivating, and leading positively with resiliency, Danielle. So both of you, I really appreciate it. Why don't we do this? Let's just go around and say, if you had one piece of wisdom to leave our audience with today, what would it be? And then I'll close up on one other thing. Gail.
I would say what's important to remember is that, what Carmen and Danielle demonstrated was they were willing to be learners. They were willing to admit what they didn't know, to live in ambiguity and the unknowing, and then keep coming out the other side. And so, the good news is that resilience is 100% learnable, right? We human beings have this really innate ability to cope with challenges, and everyone can develop new skills and become more aware and change how they respond to adverse experiences.
Thank you, Gail. Gail is our ombudsman or woman at our company. She's amazing. So thank you very much. Carmen.
Yes. What I'd say is, obviously, this was all about building your own resilience. But what I'd ask everybody to do is, no matter who you meet in your personal life, in your business life, just try to think, you don't know what they're going through, right? None of us know the challenges that other people are facing. And so just be aware of that, be cognizant of it. And if you do know that they're going through something that's very challenging, be sympathetic to that, right? And show some empathy, because I think if we were all kinder to one another, right, this world would be a better place. I know that sounds corny, but people didn't know what I was going through. And not only weren't nice, but sometimes they would use examples that were just drug related, like, oh, we got to go talk to this guy. He's addicted on drugs. And, he's that. And they had no sense that I was going through something where that hurt. Right. So just, be aware that, if you haven't walked in somebody's shoes, you don't know what they're going through. Be cognizant of it.
And words matter. And
words matter. Oh, words matter. Very good point, Teresa. Yes.
And we don't always get it right. Right. So we sometimes have to apologize and ask for forgiveness and all of those things as well.
Yep.
Danielle, One more.
Yeah. So a little bit to piggyback off what Carmen said, be sensitive to others, and just they could be going through something almost exactly like you went through, and everyone experiences things differently. So what maybe you thought was terrible or you thought wasn't so bad, was life shattering for them. Right. And so be sensitive to the fact that, everyone experiences things differently and has a different perspective. But then I would also say, that saying that you always hear, it's all in the state of mind. Carmen mentioned it, right? Like, you choose how you can look at things, right? And how you frame your mind up for the day and be ready to approach things. And I always say, like, COVID, while, awful, and, everyone talks about, oh, how terrible it was to be trapped in the house. I had 2 high schoolers that I had to spend a ton of time with because they were trapped at home, right? So to me, COVID wasn't necessarily a terrible
bad, right?
So, it's all in the way you frame it and think about it. And and so I would say, definitely, like, put things into perspective each day and start with a positive mindset.
Absolutely. Many of you know my grandmother lived to be almost 104, but since I was 8 years old, she would say, it's all in your attitude. It's all in your attitude. And when I was afraid to go through the seaweed, when I was afraid to date, it's all in your attitude. So I didn't want to leave the session without bringing up grandma, and it's all in your attitude. Last but certainly not least, if you are experiencing anything or you need help, we will make coaching, scholarships for our leadership programs, any of those things available to help you. There is a lot going on in the world right now, in the industry right now. And if we can be of service, please contact me directly, and there will be a follow-up after this. So you can learn more if you need help. Thank you. And thank you to all 3 of you for an amazing conversation, a very heartfelt expression. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Good day. Everyone have a great day. Thank you for joining. Take care.